Have you ever sat alone after a family gathering or maybe after nothing happened at all and asked yourself, when did I become someone they stopped including? It's not always loud, this feeling. It doesn't always come with a fight or a falling out. Sometimes it's just a slow fading, a silence that lingers a bit too long, a text that never arrives, a birthday that's forgotten or brushed over with a quick message, a gathering you hear about after it's already happened. At first, you try not to take it personally. You tell yourself they're busy, that life is full, that maybe they just forgot, and maybe that's even true. But deep down, a different story begins to write itself. Maybe I talk too much. Maybe I ask too many questions. Maybe I'm not needed anymore. You don't say it out loud. You try to keep your head high. But the ache, it's real. It builds in small ways, in the way you sit a little quieter when they're around, in the way you stop offering to help, in the way your own voice starts to sound distant, even to yourself. There's a woman I once knew, Mrs. in 73, proud, graceful, the kind of person who always made sure there was enough tea on the table for everyone. For years, her children came and went freely. Holidays were full. She always made the effort, cooking, gifting, remembering each of her grandchildren's quirks and favorites. Then slowly things changed. One daughter moved away. One son got caught up in work. The invitations grew sparse, the calls shorter. One holiday she cooked a full meal and waited by the door only to realize no one was coming. They had made other plans. She had simply been forgotten. She didn't cry that night. She didn't call to ask why. She just sat at the table alone in front of food made with love that no one showed up to receive. That's the kind of pain that doesn't bruise the skin, but it bruises the heart. If you know that pain, even in some quiet corner of your life, please know this: you are not alone. You are not invisible, and you are not powerless. Because even in moments of being ignored, there are things you can do. Not to force your way back in, not to prove your worth, but to stand in your own light, to stay emotionally strong even when the people you love most seem to forget how much space you once held in their lives. The first thing, and often the hardest, is to stop chasing their attention. That doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you stop placing your sense of value in whether or not they call, visit, or include you. When you constantly reach out, follow up, offer help, and bend yourself in hopes of staying relevant, you send a message not just to them, but to yourself that your worth is conditional. And your worth is not conditional. You are not lovable because you are useful. You are lovable because you are you. There's a quiet kind of power in stepping back, not in bitterness, but in dignity, in letting the silence speak, in letting others feel the space you leave behind. Sometimes, when you stop showing up in all the ways you always have, people begin to realize just how much you've been holding together. And if they don't, you begin to realize how much of yourself you've been giving away without ever being refilled. That's when the second thing becomes vital. Begin pouring into yourself. It sounds simple, it's not. Because for many of us, especially those who have built our lives around family, pouring into ourselves feels selfish, indulgent, unnatural. But it's not. It's necessary. It's healing. Start with something small, a walk you take just for you, a book you read not because it's productive, but because it's beautiful, a meal you cook slowly, not to feed others, but to nourish your own body with care. There's an older man, Mr. Dung, I once met at a community center, widowed, retired. His children rarely called, but he came to the center 3 times a week to play chess, drink strong coffee, and laugh louder than anyone else in the room. He wasn't performing. He wasn't seeking attention. He had simply stopped waiting for someone else to bring life to his day and had chosen to bring it to himself. That kind of choice builds something stronger than any apology you might be waiting for. It builds emotional muscle. And that brings us to the third thing: allow your grief to breathe, but don't let it lead. Being left out hurts. Being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, it cuts deep. And too often we try to stuff that pain down, call it nothing. Tell ourselves we're being sensitive, but you're not being sensitive. You're being human. And that sadness you feel, it deserves your kindness, not your shame. Let yourself feel it. Write it out. Cry if you need to. Talk to someone who won't try to fix it but will simply sit beside it with you. Because ignoring the pain only makes it louder. But once you've felt it, don't let it define your story. Because the truth is, your life is not over when others stop showing up for you. Sometimes that's when it finally begins. Sometimes the life you begin after being left out is the one you were always meant to live, before you gave so much of yourself away trying to stay in someone else's story. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How easily we fall into patterns of proving our worth, of showing up too much too often just to feel wanted. And when that effort isn't met, when our kindness is met with silence, when our love is met with distance, we start to question ourselves. Not them. Ourselves. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I was too needy. Maybe I've become a burden. But the truth is far more simple. You're not too much. You're simply offering yourself to people who have forgotten how to receive. And part of staying emotionally strong after being ignored or left out means learning to stop overgiving as a way to protect against rejection. Margaret, a woman I met through a senior support group, used to be the kind of mother who did everything: holidays, babysitting, financial help. She even paid her son's phone bill well into his 40s just so she had an excuse to call him once a week. I thought if I stopped giving, she told me I'd disappear. But over time, she started to notice how exhausted she felt, not just in her body, but in her heart. She realized she had become afraid to say no, afraid to speak up, afraid that the slightest boundary would make them pull away completely. That fear is real. And it's rooted in something deeper than just a need to be included. For many of us, especially those who have spent decades being caregivers, whether to children, a spouse, or even aging parents, our entire identity becomes wrapped up in being useful, in being the one who holds things together, in never needing, only giving. But strength, true strength, isn't about how much you give. It's about how honestly you live. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say no. No, I won't keep offering when nothing comes back. No, I won't keep pretending I'm okay with being forgotten. No, I won't keep showing up in spaces where my heart feels unwelcome. That doesn't mean you slam the door. It just means you stop leaving it wide open. And here's what's surprising: when you begin to hold yourself in that kind of quiet dignity, people sense it. Even if they don't acknowledge it, they sense the shift. Helen, a retired nurse in her late 60s, once told me that after years of feeling like a guest in her own daughter's home, she stopped saying yes to last-minute visits. She didn't make a scene. She simply said, "I'd love to see you, but let's plan it so it works for both of us." At first, her daughter was frustrated, dismissive. But over time, she started calling earlier, asking instead of expecting. Respect began to return, not because Helen demanded it, but because she embodied it. This is the fourth thing you can do to stay emotionally strong, live in a way that invites respect without ever begging for it. That means taking up space in your own life again. It means dressing in clothes that make you feel beautiful, not to impress anyone, but to remind yourself that you are still very much alive. It means eating meals that nourish you instead of settling for leftovers or skipped dinners just because no one's around to eat with you. It means spending time with people who see you not just out of obligation, but out of choice. Even if it's a neighbor, a clerk you see every week, a small circle of others who carry the same quiet ache, but are ready like you to start choosing themselves again. You're not here to be tolerated. You're not here to be someone's background noise. You're here to feel sunlight on your face, to laugh even if no one else is in the room, to stretch your body in the morning and think, "I'm still here." And that matters. And if you've ever felt like you're slowly fading, let this be your reminder. You don't need someone else's attention to prove that you exist. You are not invisible to yourself. And in that truth, there is power. So yes, feel the sadness when it comes. Honor it. Let it pass through you like a wave. But don't build your home in it. Don't stay small to avoid disappointment. Instead, build something new. Maybe it starts with a walk at the same time every morning. Maybe it's writing letters you'll never send. Maybe it's calling someone who always picks up even if it's not the person you wish would. These are the quiet steps that strengthen your emotional spine. And slowly those steps turn into a rhythm. And that rhythm becomes your peace. When you stop trying so hard to be seen, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin to see yourself more clearly. Not the version of you that's been bending to fit everyone else's schedule. Not the one that quietly swallows disappointment to keep the peace, but the real you, the one who still has so much life left waiting beneath the surface. And that presence, it doesn't go unnoticed. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to draw attention. People sense it. They might not have the words, but they feel the difference when someone no longer clings, but stands calmly rooted. And the ones who once overlooked you, they pause, even if briefly, because something in you no longer asks for approval. Helen, the retired nurse, shared with me how after she began saying no with calm and grace, her adult children started treating her differently. Not right away, she told me. But slowly they began to look at me, not through me. She said it was like a fog had lifted. And it wasn't because she had changed them, it was because she had changed her relationship with herself. She stopped begging to belong. She started creating a life where she already did. And this is what emotional strength really looks like, not forcing people to love you louder, but loving yourself more quietly, more steadily in their silence. There's a man named Kong, 81, lives alone in a modest house. His children visit now and then, but not often. He used to wait by the phone every weekend. When it didn't ring, his whole mood would drop. Then, one Sunday after another long, quiet morning, he picked up a brush and started painting. Not because he thought he was good, just because he needed to do something for himself. That brush became a lifeline. Soon his walls were covered in color, not polished, not perfect, but full of joy. When his daughter finally came to visit and saw what he'd done, she was stunned. "Dad," she said, "I didn't know you were still like this." He smiled and replied, "I didn't either, but I am." It's easy to let the world shrink around you when you're constantly being left out. But the moment you realize you can fill that space with your own light, the entire landscape of your life begins to change. And what's most important is this: your healing doesn't depend on their return. It begins the moment you stop waiting. You start choosing clothes that make you feel like you again, not for anyone else's eyes, but because you like the way the sleeves rest on your shoulders, the way the color lifts your cheeks. You turn on music in the kitchen while you cook dinner for one, and you let yourself hum along, not because someone's watching, but because it feels good to be alive. And slowly the parts of you that had gone quiet begin to speak again. Your mind feels clearer, not because the circumstances changed, but because you stopped rehearsing old conversations and started writing new ones with yourself. Your body feels more grounded, not because the aches disappeared, but because you're tending to it with gentleness instead of resentment. Your spirit feels fuller, not because you're surrounded, but because you've remembered that your presence is enough. When you live this way, something beautiful happens, even if others don't immediately respond. You stop fearing their absence. You stop shrinking in their silence. You stop molding yourself to fit into spaces that were never shaped for your soul. And without bitterness, without coldness, without walls, you begin to shine differently. Not brighter, not louder, just truer. And that truth begins to draw in new things. You might find yourself connecting more deeply with a neighbor who shares your love for gardening. You might discover a local library club where your words matter again. You might feel joy while walking in the early morning, waving to the same man watering his gate, smiling just because you're both still here. These are not grand moments, but they are real, and they build something that cannot be taken from you. A life rooted in dignity, a presence that does not depend on being invited, a soul that has learned to stand not in spite of being overlooked, but because of it. Because sometimes the very thing that broke your heart is what leads you back to yourself, and you are worth returning to. You always were. So, when you're ignored or left out, remember this: you are not the forgotten one. You are the one remembering your own worth. And that kind of strength, it changes everything. You no longer ask, why didn't they include me? Instead, you ask, where do I want to go today? What fills me? What matters now? And those answers come not in a rush, but in a calm knowing. A knowing that you can be alone without being lonely, that you can be silent and still feel heard because you're listening now. And sometimes, when you stop waiting for the invitation, you realize you were never supposed to be waiting at all. You were meant to begin again on your own terms. If you're still with me, still listening after all this time, thank you. Truly. That alone tells me something important about you. It tells me your heart is open. It tells me you still believe in the quiet strength of reflection, even after everything you've carried. There's something incredibly powerful about allowing yourself to feel the ache of being left out and still choosing not to let it harden you, about being overlooked and still showing up for yourself anyway, about not being invited and still deciding I am worth spending time with. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. You've lived long enough to know that love doesn't always come wrapped in attention, that sometimes the people you poured the most into become the quietest in your life. And yet, you keep choosing to care. You keep choosing to try. You keep choosing to feel. That takes courage. It's so easy to shut down, to go silent, to become bitter or cold. But you're here, listening. Maybe a little bruised, maybe a little tired, but still here, still open, still reaching for something true. And that's where healing begins, not in fixing the people who left you out, but in remembering you never needed to be chosen to be valuable. You already are. And if no one else reminded you of that today, I want to say it to you. Clearly, lovingly, without hesitation. You matter. You are allowed to protect your heart. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say yes to yourself even when others have forgotten how to. You don't have to wait for their call to feel whole. You don't have to show up at every event hoping to be noticed. You don't have to shrink to stay welcome in their world. You can build your own. You can sit in your own quiet kitchen, pour a cup of tea, and say to yourself, I am enough. You can stand by your window, see the light change, and let that be your company. You can laugh to yourself over a funny memory and feel joy without anyone needing to witness it. Because this life, it still belongs to you. And if anything in this message resonated, if it made you feel a little less alone, a little more seen, I'd love to hear your story. Truly. Has there been a moment you realized someone was no longer including you? How did you respond? What helped you find strength in the silence? Please share in the comments if you feel comfortable, not for sympathy, but because your voice matters. And when we speak truthfully, we create a space where others can whisper back, me too. And if you'd like to keep walking this path with me, this path of rediscovery, of reflection, of living fully from the inside out, I invite you to subscribe, not for the numbers, but for the community, for the comfort of knowing you have a place to return to when the world feels a little too quiet. Because you do. You are not forgotten. You are not fading. You are not too old to begin again. And if the people in your life can't see that yet, let you be the one who does. So sit tall, breathe deep, and keep showing up not for their approval, but for your own becoming. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. And I promise you, someone somewhere is watching you do that and drawing strength from it. So thank you for being here, for being you. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You've come farther than most will ever understand. And I'm so very proud of the way you keep going.